Welcome to Thrive Deeper, an ongoing conversation with Dr. Matthew Jacoby, author of the Thrive Bible Reading Guides, teaching pastor and leader of the Psalmist band Sons of Korah. Join us as we go deeper into the Bible, discussing the passages as we read them together with Thrive. Now here's your host, DJ Payne.
G'day and welcome to episode 45 of the Thrive Deeper podcast. It's DJ Payne here, your humble host, and I'm so excited that you are joining me on this conversation that I had with Matt around the issue of conflict. We are nearly through the book of Proverbs, and so many times in the book of Proverbs it talks about good communication. It talks about dealing with conflict. It talks about how to deal with it. Well, we're going to go deep on that personal conflict level. But first, Matt and I get into a conversation about the calendar that is happening right now and what is going on in the Christian calendar. So join us after the break as Matt and I sit down behind the microphones on Thrive Deeper. All right, Matt, it's that time of year again where we're on the road to...
Which time of year is it?
Coming up to Easter.
Oh, well, yes, we are.
We are coming up to Easter now.
Oh, it's amazing. The year's just scooting by so quickly. It can't be true.
We are only...
I'm not going to accept that it's true.
Well, you can fight against it, but I'm excited because... this is my favourite time of year. We're both part of a tradition that doesn't really celebrate the religious calendar.
No, that's right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And God bless those people, whatever background you come from. And there's been a big swing amongst the evangelical reformed to go back towards the church calendar, the religious holidays and stuff like that. And we both have dear friends who celebrate that almost every day on Facebook or on social media. Yeah. This is coming up to Palm Sunday. This is that. Remember this, But how come we're not part of that tradition?
Well, the liturgical calendar or the Christian year, however you want to refer to it, was part of the rhythm of it was part of the Catholic tradition, part of the Eastern Orthodox tradition. They have slightly different calendars, of course.
Yes.
So the Eastern Orthodox churches actually have a different date for Easter. It's a way of dividing the year up. Very similar, actually, to the way that Old Testament Israel did it to commemorate different events in the past, and of course, a lot of those churches used a lectionary as well, with organised readings for the whole year, and they celebrated. They celebrated this. So you would have not only Christmas and Easter, which are the ones that everyone celebrates, but as you said, you've got Palm Sunday, and then there's Pentecost, and then there's Lent and the Advent, and
yes.
so all of these different parts of the liturgical calendar, which I think there's a lot of merit in that. I mean, it's a time when we remember certain things, and that idea of adding sort of a structure to life, to our year, I think that can be a great thing. I mean, but you're right. Like I have never been, like in all my times in churches, I've never really celebrated that. So. No, I'm going to put that differently. It's not that I haven't celebrated it. It's just that my celebration of it hasn't been done in accordance with the fixed liturgical calendar.
Yes.
So I guess it's part of that more liturgical traditions, churches that are oriented towards doing things more liturgically. Yeah. Now, that's a strange thing to say in one stage, because in a sense, our church and all contemporary churches have a kind of a liturgy.
Yeah, have their own traditions and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but but by liturgical, I mean perhaps liturgical with a big L, which is very much following a form that has been used for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands in the case of some churches. So
it's been an interesting journey as it's becoming more popular, and I get to know, having been raised in a very being raised in the Independent Baptist Church, very fundamentalist conservative scene. Anything like that, anything that smelt of smoke and mirrors, or there definitely was smoke involved, but
no, I don't think the mirrors is part of it. Let's call it incense and incense and robes.
Well, anything that smelt of the high church type of tradition was really frowned upon, especially because a lot of people in that Southern Baptist, Independent Baptist, type of tradition came out of the Catholic Church, came out of those traditions, so they wanted nothing of it. But as I've grown as a Christian and had different friends, it's sometimes caused a little bit of conflict in talking to them about what churches should be doing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's an interesting one because, as I said, I think there is merit in it, and I think we can pendulum swing too far. I'm not sure if. Well, there's two things, and I'm going to talk from a personal point of view here.
Go.
The first is I went to a Catholic boarding school for 5 years, so we were living in there. We were living with the priests, and that it was, I have to say that wasn't a positive experience of faith for me, and towards the end of that time, I was about as hard, fast an atheist and anti-religion guy as you could find. I mean, vehemently.
It's that old tradition of, that old saying of, you send a kid to a Catholic school or to a religious school, and it's like an inoculation. They get vaccinated with just enough.
I got vaccinated,
just enough of the stuff, so you'd never have to be, you're never going to catch it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, we got stuffed full of it, really. But, and I mean, I guess part of that was this, was this constant, the constant sort of liturgical, it was this season and that season and this season. And so I'm just talking from a personal point of view. So I've come out of a place where and I, I mean, our house father was he was one of those conservative Catholics that says the Mass isn't a Mass if it's not in Latin.
Yes.
And so we sat through Latin masses even, and so I had this. I suppose I have this exposure to something that's all about forms, but that can cause me to pendulum swing. I'm owning this.
Yeah.
I'm a pendulum swinger, right?
Yeah.
And so I have. I became a Christian in my late teens, right when I was at my hardest and most vehement sort of anti-religious disposition. God turned up and said, "All right, that'll do. You're coming with me," and really, and it was just a complete darkness to light kind of experience. And so I came in, and my first churches were Baptist churches and very simple, and I actually loved that, because I'd had this amazing encounter with God, and I think I liked it because it was nothing like that that I had before. So I think the tradition that we belong goes back to that pendulum swing, that it's nothing like that, and actually a little bit of, I think we can become too anti-tradition and too anti-forms and too anti-year routines, and I agree we can be. But the thing with this is an interesting topic. We're just getting lost on this topic, but let's do that because it's interesting. Yeah. The thing is that I think you kind of, to go in for it, you've got to go in for the whole thing. And there's and I think it dictates the year. Like, as a pastor, I would say, I just think it dictates the year too much. I would like the freedom to do what we feel like is good and healthy for our particular congregation, without being dictated to by this thing where every year we have to do the same kind of cycle. And it's not that we don't celebrate those things. I mean, I would say, I mean, we're coming up to a celebration of the resurrection, the death and resurrection of Jesus, but in a sense, every Sunday should be a celebration of the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I mean, that's the centerpiece of the gospel. So it's not that I feel it's not that I would say, like same with Pentecost and all of these other, Palm Sunday and so forth. These are really important events, and I think we should know and understand these events and connect with them. But I think the liturgical year, the constancy of the liturgical year, I think causes an inflexibility that's perhaps problematic.
Yeah, there's definitely
that's my personal approach, and I may, in 2 years' time, you may talk to me, and I might say to you, DJ, I just realised I've had a revelation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'd be great to have someone to speak to that positively, because it's actually really good to hear from someone for whom that means a lot, to actually hear from them. And unfortunately, I'm not one of those people.
Well, let us know.
I'm like dyed-in-the-wool Baptist,
That's it.
Evangelical Baptist.
I'm a bit the same, and so you're getting our perspective on it there. Not again, but I do look at it and going from a young earnest Christian and sort of poo-pooing people who are into that, saying, "How for just religion? It's just poo-pooing it."
Well, that would exactly, because it's not for
no. And then I've seen the beauty of it and the tradition of it and the gentleness of it and the power of it, and I'm like, oh, gee, I might be missing out on something here.
Yeah.
So, look, dear listener, let us know if you want us to talk further about that, or if you've got someone who you think would be interesting in. But as I said before, and I know that it's happened in your life as well, Matt, is that sometimes having a discussion with people on different sides of the fence, whether it's about this calendar or whether it's about other parts of the faith, sometimes this comes down to conflict. With another person.
Yeah.
The Proverbs talks about conflicts and how to deal with conflicts so much, and especially in the last few chapters we've been in. Yeah. There's a lot to say about conflict, dealing with conflict.
Yeah, there is. It's interesting to see how big a theme this is in the Proverbs, and it's simply because it's a big part of life. Conflict. We conflict with people. I mean, there's all sorts of conflicts going on in the Bible, and most of them I wouldn't recommend. There's lots of all the battles and everything. Now, we're not talking about that kind of conflict.
Not talking wars.
Because that's another complex subject when we come to Scripture. We're talking about interpersonal conflict. And this is something actually that is spoken to a lot in the Proverbs. The main idea that you get from the Proverbs is this is a negative thing. So, for example, Proverbs 17 verse 1 says, "Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife."
Yeah.
And Proverbs 17:14 says, "Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out." So there's this sense that we should not be quarrelsome, pugnacious, or whatever word you want. It's like we shouldn't be wanting to just get into quarrels all the time or pick quarrels unnecessarily. And as you, I mean, this can happen we can pick quarrels over the smallest little things, and we can make them into big issues, and perhaps the issue that we started off, it can be one of those issues we can quarrel about, whereas actually maybe we should be listening to each other and hearing each other's point of views. But I want to take this maybe to another level actually, and talk about personal relationships. And one of the things that can happen is because conflict is a bad thing. I mean, it's not a good thing that we conflict, but there's an inevitability to it, because we are, each one of us, in as much as that we are still imperfect people. Yeah. We therefore are internally conflicted, and therefore it's inevitable that we're going to conflict with one another. So we should not unnecessarily create conflict, but we need to also recognize that conflict actually is a given, and that as people, it's going to be an inevitability, and the key is how to work through that.
Yeah, because even there's going to be times in your life where you're doing everything right, you're being faithful to what God's called you, you're doing, but the person that you're working alongside with you all of a sudden does something and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to fight about this.
Yeah.
I didn't want to fight about this. I was, so there's those type of things. All right, well, let's take a break for a second and we'll get into this concept of conflict and those personal relationships and what the Proverbs speaks to that. We'll be back in just a second here on Thrive Deeper. It's DJ Payne here with Matt Jacoby, and we are talking Proverbs yet again on this episode 45 of Thrive Deeper. Can you believe we're up to episode 45, Matt?
Wow. Have we been talking that much?
There's plenty of talking out there. 45 episodes, and on this episode, we've decided to go down into one of the themes that's really central to the book of Proverbs, and that is personal conflict.
Yeah.
Conflict with friends, family, brothers, sisters, people of the faith, outside of the faith. How are we supposed to deal with it, seeing that it's going to be a given in life?
Yeah, that's right. So I said, before the break that conflict is a given. Now, what happens is that conflict, they become disputes, quarrels, fights. And this is the thing that can be avoided, actually. There's an inevitability about conflict, but it doesn't have to turn into a standoff. And what happens is you get this attack and defense thing in relationships, whatever relationships, at work, or you have a disagreement, and it so quickly jumps to an attack and defense thing, and it actually doesn't need to, because that comes down to the way that we communicate. And communication really is the key here. But the first, I want to just go back and just underscore this fact about the inevitability of conflict, because one of the worst things we can do, given that the inevitability of conflict, is actually suppress conflict. Is so, this person has hurt me or offended, I'm just going to suppress this.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Matt, because reading through the Proverbs again, sometimes the advice that is given sounds like it's better to suppress it.
That's right. And it's actually not saying that. The advice of the Proverbs is that we should avoid unnecessary conflict. So actually it's talking about quarrel. It actually is talking about quarrels and fights. Okay. Whereas I'm talking about conflict as a basic human state. Okay. That it doesn't need to become a quarrel. So there's a proverb that says, "A brother wronged is more unyielding than a fortified city. Disputes are like barred gates of the citadel." And this is what happens actually when we feel hurt or angry or whatever. Often we can go into attack defense mentality. So we either, if I'm angry with you, I say something even subtly that just attacks you, and
the passive aggressive side of things.
And that may be like you might respond to me with an attack back, or you might do the passive aggressive thing. Yeah. Okay, where I'm just going to close the gates.
Yes.
And this is what, the fortified city picture here. And this is what you really have, is that you have this, imagine this picture of two people who have become like fortresses because they've hurt one another, and or have been hurt, and so they withdraw into fortresses, and you get this catapulting of these attacks, catapulting over the walls. Yes. And this is a big issue. It's interesting, actually. I've done quite a bit of pre-marriage counselling with couples, and even some in actually people who have been married. And
But also in the role of a pastor, you've got family
as a role of
dynamics
pastor,
and friends and all
that's
sorts of
right,
stuff.
So, and this has completely been a learning journey as well for me. One of the most important learning journeys actually in my life. This is very close to my heart because I have recognised that you can move forward, and actually it's not even that complex to move forward. You just got to make decisions, and I mean that there are some times where you've got to bite the bullet and swallow some pride and show some grace, and that is costly. So I'm not saying it's not costly, but no matter how conflicted the relationship that you're in right now, there is there are possibilities for moving ahead. Now, of course, there are some relationships, and I want to really underscore this too, where it may not be possible. Resolution may not be possible, or where it may not even be safe to bring resolution. But where it is...
Now, hang on. Don't just jump past that, because some people might be going, hang on, there's going to be two types of people listening right now. Those who've got a situation in their head thinking you're talking to them, and those who don't understand what you're saying.
Right. So what I'm talking about is cases of abuse, for example, where there is abuse. Oh, I've got to go back to the abuse. Well, no, that may not be. You need to get advice about that actually, and we have a right to protect ourselves and so forth.
And you can forgive someone.
Yeah.
Be truly forgive them in your heart, and
it may still not be safe to go back into that situation.
And you can still move on. It doesn't mean you have to go back to that same wound.
So. And really the principle, if we can sort our conflict out, then and if it's safe and it's possible, then we should, because relationships are the most important thing. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul and strength. Jesus said, love your neighbour as yourself. Yes. That means that relationships are the most important thing in life. Our relationship with God first, our relationship with our brothers and sisters. Yeah. And in as much as God shows grace to us in that relationship, so also we need to pass grace on. So this is an area where, and I refer to a marriage situation just because the closer the relationship is, the more likelihood there is of conflict, okay? It's very easy for me to have no conflict with you if I don't get very close to you, you know what I mean? But marriage relationships, because of the vulnerability in that relationship and because of the constancy of the relationship, it's much more likely to have conflict. So marriage relationships are often the most conflicted. So one of the things that we do in pre-marriage counselling is to, first of all, assume conflict, and then to give couples the tools to work through conflict. Now, the assuming conflict bit is interesting with young couples because because they think that there's no, because they think that invalidates their relationship. Yeah. If there's conflict, then maybe I'm with the wrong person. Yeah, and they're going to stay on honeymoon. You're with another. That's right. No, you are with another imperfect person. Yeah, honeymoon forever. Yeah, that's perfect. Right. Yeah, so exactly. And especially, so again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, especially those who've had conflict with parents in their past. Yeah. I often see that a lot of them run to someone who, they because they've experienced that in a family home, or they've experienced divorce, they think that anything to do with conflict in this partner that's right. is, there's never going to be any conflict. We're never going to fight. Yeah. Never going to fight, that's right. And it's like you're setting yourself up for fail. Well, you don't have to fight, but you do have to work through conflict. Yeah. And conflict has to come to the surface. And this is the thing that, with we run the Prepare Enrich course for all of our young couples at church who are preparing to be married, and they fill out this long questionnaire and ask all sorts of questions. We encourage them, please be really honest, right? And if they're not, it can catch them out, because it measures for what the Prepare Enrich material creators called idealistic distortion, and it measures for that. And if they're high in idealistic distortion, it's like, okay, we're going to have to work a bit harder to bring out the areas of conflict. Now that sounds, to a lot of people, that means bring out areas of conflict. What are you talking about? If the conflict's there, the worst thing is for it to be suppressed. It'd be like an infection. It'd be like if you had an infected wound, and you stitched up the wound. Yeah. Or just put a Band-Aid on it. Or pretend it's not there. That's right. It's totally fine. And literally, there's some people that like you said, for those reasons, no, I'm stitching over it. Yeah. That is the worst thing that you can do. Yeah. It actually will destroy the relationship. It it causes infection to destroy the relationship. So So we try to bring to the surface conflict that's there, to give couples the tools to actually work through that. And the key to working through that is communication. Now, well, actually, there are two things: communication and grace. Actually, now I'm going to emphasize the communication thing because I hope we can take it as a given. Let's just, grace is absolutely important. As we have received grace, so we need to pass on grace.
Yes.
Now, let's just be clear. Grace means treating another person in a way that their behavior does not warrant. Okay? They have behaved in a way that does not warrant me being, that only actually warrants me attacking back.
Yes.
But grace means that if that's the case, then you have to return. The gentle answer actually is the answer. Here we go. Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Okay, so someone has to make the choice
to have that gentle
to bring the gentle answer. Now that that act of grace to absorb perhaps an attack or to is actually can be really important, and returning a gentle answer. However, in talking about grace, it's really, really important. Grace does not mean that you do not communicate how you feel back to that person. For a lot of people, grace is doing what you say. I'm not even going to enter into conflict.
I'm putting on the smile. I'm absorbing the hurt yet again, and everything's going to be okay.
That's right. And I'm just going to take it on the chin again and again and again. Yeah. It's really important that you not do that. Actually,
because when you think of God's grace and what it cost God to give us grace, he's not putting on a fake smile. He's not asking us to pretend. He's actually asking the opposite.
Very good point. Yeah.
You need to look right into my eyes and almost have your soul burn away, and then you're going to understand how much grace.
That's right. I mean, God communicates with us and wants us to know exactly where we have gone wrong. I mean, because to restore the relationship, we need to know where there has been conflict in that relationship. So God forgives us and shows grace to us, but He also wants to deal with the areas where we are in conflict with Him. Yeah. Now, the same goes for relationships. Grace does not mean that you get walked over. Grace does not mean that you get abused and that you say nothing and just take it on the chin. What grace means is that you don't attack back. What you must do is communicate back.
Yep.
So now, attack is where you insult the other person, or put the other person, or make general statements about the other person. So attack is, you always you always do this, and you're never this, or you are this, or you are that. That's you're so this or whatever. Yeah. Right. That you're making statements about that that person. Communication is where you are actually saying something about yourself, which is that is really hurtful.
And even just
then you're saying something. It's like I feel really disrespected by that, or where you're actually communicating how you feel. Yeah. That is what communication is.
That's such an important tool, and it almost, for some people, it can sound like a trick. Yeah. Like it's just a trick. Yeah. But okay, think of it as a trick. But it's a real trick. It's a true trick. Just changing the argument or the conflict to, like you said, the classic one is you always or I never. Changing that to, this is how I feel. I feel in my heart that you've hurt me because of this. It changes the dynamic. Just stopping and repeating back and thinking of that phrase can change so much. It can make the person unlock and open up and go, hang on, I didn't know you felt like that. I thought this was about me.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, one of the things, though, that and the other complication here is that for an act of communication to have ultimately positive results, the other person actually has to validate your feelings as well. Now, when I speak about validating feelings, because I spoke about this at church, and I know that some people think, hang on, no, feelings aren't always valid though, because they're often based on lies and no, I'm not talking, like I know that, but
the Stoics in the crowd are saying,
that's
hang
right.
on.
But you have to, I put it this way, you have to face the truth about your feelings before your feelings are going to face the truth. So, in that sense, a feeling is what a feeling, like you feel how you feel. Yeah. And just, so the worst thing, if someone communicates to you and tells you how they feel, the worst thing you can do is say, well, that's stupid. Yeah. It's stupid that you feel that. Yeah. Like you shouldn't feel like that. Yeah. Or, well, I didn't mean that. No, it's not about you. It's like, no, just listen to how they feel. Yeah. I mean, look, there may be, at some point, perhaps you should actually clear up misunderstanding. In fact, sometimes earlier rather than later, where there literally has been misunderstanding. But sometimes, it's like you say to me that that's really hurtful. And I feel like, so I've done something wrong, right? So I go to defense. Yes. This is the other breakdown in communication. Yeah. So let's say you communicate to me really well, actually. Yeah. And even if you don't, even if you say, you always put me down. Yeah. I've got to translate that. If I'm going to return
here in the studio, Matt, and you're always late. How come you're always late into the studio? That's right. Leave me hanging here like I've got nothing better to do, Matt Jacoby. You make me feel like.
That's right. Okay.
This is not based on any truth, people.
That's right. No, it's not. So for me to return a gentle answer means that I actually listen to how you feel in that. Yeah. Okay. You feel disrespected, you feel undervalued, you feel like, okay, even if you communicate that badly, being the one that starts the good communication means being the first to listen. But to validate, for me to validate your feelings, like if I just say, well, I didn't mean to, like, because what's happened then is that, let's say you've communicated your feelings to me, I think, gee, I've done something wrong, right? Now, none of us like to face the fact that we've done something wrong, right? None of us want to face that. So what we do is that we say, well, I didn't mean to. Yeah. Now, perhaps there are situations where you really didn't, right? But that actually, in the moment, what the other person needs in that moment is not information about what you did or didn't mean, right? Because that's just you defending yourself in that situation. So that maybe there is a place for that, but that needs to come second. The first thing that you need to do is to empathize and actually listen to how they're feeling and even reflect that back, summarize. So like just do something to show that you have actually heard their feeling. And then subsequent to that, then you can say, look, I had no idea I came across like that. I really didn't mean to convey that. I'm really sorry, but I can totally understand how that you feel that way. Like you've just got to
communication can actually begin.
So it's in that sense that we need to validate. That's what I mean about validating feelings. It's just listen, because when someone communicates feelings, even badly, think of it. It can either become the beginning of conflict, or it can actually become a moment to deepen the relationship.
Amen.
Amen. It really can. Yeah. It's actually really golden moments.
Yes.
There's a doorway there that you can actually walk through into a deeper relationship.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I think this is a biblical principle that is so deep that we often don't see the forest for the trees. You know what I mean? And it's interesting. I know that we're getting into. I know that there's going to be some people listening, the Stoics amongst us, who are going to be like, "Oh, Matt, you're getting into a bit of touchy-feely, esoteric, humanity, stuff." And I don't read everything you've talked about there. Where's the verse for that? Where's the chapter and verse of that in Proverbs? I didn't see that. But let me just talk to that, and you can talk to it as well, Matt. Proverbs talks so much about conflict, listening, being a good listener, and having great communication. Yeah. We also see that modeled. Everything that you've talked about, we see modeled in the life of Christ. Yeah. Type of thing. Take those two things into example and understand that God has given us the tools to build on these proverbs and this sage advice. Some of it might rub against us and feel like this sounds like a bit of mamby-pamby, sort of like, therapy advice, because some of us have been raised to be opposed to that, especially, the great Aussie male who can do it themselves and that type of thing.
Yeah, all the best with having relationships in that mindset. honestly, if you think that way, like, how are your relationships going?
My relationships are great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, but
Let's ask some other people. Sorry, I'm being mean here.
No, and I'm speaking about someone who has a large propensity to do that.
Yeah.
You know, has my inner compass is very much wired that way.
Yeah.
You know, type of thing. And the learning curve for me has to be able to go, I can see, it's almost like I see a lot of Proverbs pointing the sign, head this way.
Yeah.
And once we walk down that way, we find other advice and other wisdom that God has given us through all different sources. Yeah. It's that wisdom that we need to be opened up to. We can't live our life and say, well, listen, Matt, I don't read a chapter and verse about this validating their feelings business in the scripture. Well, hang on a minute. It does say we need to communicate and have harmonious and we need to live in relationship to each other. Let's look to the experts around this and go into that. Am I making sense?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And in fact, there is, feelings are important. They are validated. I mean, the Psalms are all expressions of feelings.
Yes.
And the Psalms show us that actually God wants to hear how we feel, right? And in a lot of cases, like, God, why have you rejected us forever? I mean, the psalmist knows exactly that God hadn't forget, but he felt that way. Yeah. And what the Psalms do is they validate the way that we feel, and they teach us to express the way that we feel to God, right? Yeah. So, the same thing is needed in not only in our relationship with God, but in relationship with each other. The same kind of honesty, right? To be able to communicate honestly how we feel. And then you go to the Proverbs, and there's so much in the Proverbs about listening, and a lot of the obstacles in relationships, things like I've said, the need to justify myself, like the pride and the ability to receive correction, for example. Again, another big theme in the Proverbs, like being correctable. Yeah,
just the fact, how many times do we have the phrase, listen, my son, heed to what I'm saying.
That's right.
Don't ignore what your mother's been teaching. Listen, be teachable.
And heed discipline, be teachable. All of these are big themes in the Proverbs. And every moment, even if someone's communicating to you something and you think that here is an opportunity that I might discover something bad about myself. That's a golden moment for you. It's a golden moment, right? Because that's how you grow, right? And growth we should put a high value on growth. Living things grow. If you're not growing, you're not living, right? Yeah. So if we want to grow, it means discovering those little chinks and those areas of dysfunctionality in our lives. Now, the best way to discover the things that are wrong with you is in really close relationships. And a lot of people withdraw from really close relationships because they think, it's bringing out all this bad stuff in me. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what it's meant to do. That relationship is working really well because it's bringing out all that bad stuff. The question is, what are you going to do about all that bad stuff? Yeah. Because being teachable in line, as the Proverbs say, means that when there's the opportunity of discovering something that might be wrong with you, that you grasp that opportunity. Yeah. And you say to the other person, tell me more. So I'm coming across like this. Yeah. So you got to mind that. Okay. Yeah. Now,
iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, that's right. You've got to mind that. And this is not natural. Yeah. Believe me, I know this is not natural. Like I'm a proud person. I like to be in the right. Yeah. And I can be a big one for defending myself and saying, well, I didn't mean that. Yeah. And there's so many times, and my apologies to all those people that I've said this to, is like, well, I'm sorry if I made you fit.
Yes.
There've been way too many apologies in my life that have been delivered like that. The non-apology apology, and I apologise for the times, because actually it's never made anything better. No. And so these moments all become obstacles actually to my growth. As I think back, I think in that situation, rather than defending myself, rather than saying, well, I didn't mean to do that, and then just trying to get rid of the conflict by saying, well, I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. Mm-hmm. As I look back now, I think, oh man, I actually see in retrospect that there was something wrong, actually. Yeah. And I only really dealt with that maybe like a long time afterwards. Yeah, yeah. And I could have grown. That was a time where I really could have grown in that moment and discovered something about myself. Yeah. So you've got to grab those moments, and they're moments that are healthier for you. Like, let's say you and I have a dispute, right? And it turns out that I'm right and you're wrong, right? We have an argument. I'm right, you're wrong. Great. Guess what?
Has never happened in real life, by the way. But
of course. So if I'm right, I get nothing out of that.
Yes. Yep.
Great. I'm right. Yay!
You win.
Yay
You
for
win.
me, right? Yeah.
You win. I lose.
Yeah. And actually, it doesn't even make. In fact, we all lose because it doesn't make the relationship any better.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if I discover that I'm wrong, then I can gain something, because actually I can grow. Yeah. And yet we still find within ourselves this propensity to avoid at all costs. Self-justify, defend. No, we need to let down the defenses. It's good for us. It's good for our relationships. And learn how to communicate, actually. And even if the other person isn't communicating well, we need to do whatever we can to communicate. Now, it takes two to make a relationship work. And I understand that you might be in a relationship where, where you're giving it your best go, the other person is. I would suggest, in fact, in those relationships that you go and get some relationship counselling.
Yes.
That can be a way of actually someone else needs to then help, or you can read some books about this or whatever. But communication and grace is the key here, and you are going to have to you're going to have to show a lot of grace. You're going to have to do that because that's the life that you signed up to. But that doesn't mean that you get walked over.
No.
If it's without communication, you're just retreating into your fortress. So it's really important that we learn to do this.
It's a hard one. It's funny, Matt. You reminded me in that last illustration there of how many times I've spoken to young guys getting married, especially guys who are getting married later. Guys who are getting married later in life, and it happens more and more these days, of course, in our culture. And I always say the same thing to the guys. I say, be prepared to lose and gracefully, willingly lose the fight. Yeah. Just lose the fight. Yeah. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, you'll know these words, my head will be like a cartoon character who's swimming around you at one point when you're having a fight, and it could be about the most mundane thing, where to put the spoons in the drawer or which way the soap sits in the shower, whatever those little things that you have. And some people are really particular about certain things. You're going to have a fight and you're going to be right. Yeah. Lose the fight. Just lose it, because you're not winning. The fight is the worst thing for that relationship.
Right. Exactly.
Because you
might win, but the relationship loses, and then ultimately you lose.
Yeah, because you're making the person. The best thing that can happen in your scenario is that you're the winner. Yeah. And you turn your wife or your friend or whatever the situation is, you turn them into the loser. Yeah. And that is not going to do anything for the relationship. Yeah. It's so hard to learn. Yeah, it's so hard to learn.
Yeah. Well, I want to really encourage everyone who's listening that we're called to be peacemakers, and peace happens on the other side of healthy conflict, like going through, like we have to resolve issues. Peace is not just the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of harmony.
Yes. And in the face of a conflict.
Yeah. It's the resolution of conflict. Yes, actually. Yes. And what you get to on the other side of resolving conflict is actually something much more beautiful than if conflict had never happened, actually, because you have communicated through something, and we make that kind of peace, and we have to work for it, right? It's going to cost us something. We're going to have to take it on the chin. We're going to have to absorb some hurt. We're going to have to communicate through. We're going to have to come out of our fortress, and that's going to. That's what it means to be peacemakers, and we're called to be people. We're called to be messengers of grace and peacemakers. So, like, before you go off and save the world, start applying this at home, and I, because that's where it's going to be the hardest to apply this. But if you can apply this there, I don't think I've grown in any part of my life more than I have in my relationships at home. And this is my relationships with my wife and my kids, in learning to be a good husband and a good father, which has been such a process and is still very much going. Yeah. But this is where most of the growth happens.
Yep. Amen.
For me. So Amen. I just really encourage our listeners to engage with that, learn to communicate, learn to show grace, and embrace moments of conflict as potential opportunities for growth.
Conflict. We live with it usually every day. I bet you right now you can think of at least one person. It might be that work colleague. It might be someone in your family that you're dealing with conflict. Well, our prayer for you today is that you would pray and ask for that grace, that wisdom that comes from the book of Proverbs, that light that only comes from Father to help you deal with that conflict. It's hard. It's something, as Matt and I were having that conversation time and time again, I was getting convicted right there. So it's an interesting conversation. Please, we would love to be part of that conversation with you. Get in touch with us through the website, thrivetoday.net.au. You can send us an email directly through the website and let us know what your thoughts are about conflict. Is there anything you disagree with what Matt and I are saying? Are you having conflict with us right now? We'd love to hear from you. Now listen, I've got a bonus part of the podcast today. Keep on listening, and after Benita, the lovely voiceover lady, gives you all the details about how to find us and everything, keep on listening because there's a little bonus bit at the end of the podcast that I think you might be interested in listening to. Well, until next week, we will see you back here for Thrive Deeper. On behalf of Matt Jacoby, Stu, and all of us involved, thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Thrive Deeper. We value all our listening community. If you are on Facebook, search and like Thrive Today page to get all of our latest updates. Our home on the internet is at thrivetoday.net.au. There you can subscribe to the Thrive Daily Reading Guide and contact us directly. That's at thrivetoday.net.au. Until next time, thrive.
Now, I've got one more question that might end up in the podcast or at the end of the podcast or whatever, right? This is a bonus bit. Did you watch Christians Like Us?
No.
All right, the SBS program. Okay, last year there was an SBS program. Have you heard about the show?
Yes.
Last year they did a show, a two-part series called Muslims Like Us, where they got 10 different Muslims of really like one end of the spectrum to the other, put them in a house together for a week and recorded the conversations. They've just done a season. They recorded in November where they got 10 very different Christians and put them in a house together and have, put it out. Now, it is available around the world wherever you are via SBS On Demand app. I'll put the link in the show notes for this one. By the time this episode goes out, both parts will be out there on the app. It's only a two-part series. Now, my question in regarding that, Matt, is some of the the 10 Christians that they have on the podcast. A handful of them, I would say, are evangelical, Bible-believing people, right? Practicing, pastor and evangelist, people like that. Anglican, Pentecostal, Baptist, that type of thing. We also have a Mormon, a Latter-day Saint in there. We have a gay, non-practicing Christian, as in gay, non-practicing, going to church or anything like that, former Baptist. Yeah. We have a lady who performs abortions, who's part of the Uniting Church. We have a female priest. We have a Catholic. We have people who've been abused by priests and pastors. It's like a divergent mix of people, right? Like from one end of the spectrum to the other. And straight away, conflict arises amongst it. And the producers of the show are really pushing for Christianity in crisis in Australia. Let's have a look at these crazy Christians and the fight that they've got on about all these different things. Females, gay, marriage, but all the things that culture
That's called stirring up conflict.
But I'm really amazed at there's a couple of voices in that group that are wanting to be the peacemakers and saying, we need to find a way, and I want you to speak to this just for a second, Matt. I know you haven't seen the show, but and we started at this beginning of the conversation of the podcast, amongst believers sometimes, there's going to be a conflict that there isn't a resolution for. As in,
Yeah.
you believe that
Yeah.
this is doctrinal truth, pick your favourite hobby horse doctrine. And I believe that's not so. And we both can argue from Scripture. We are both convicted. We are both convinced. How do you resolve that conflict?
Yeah, that's a different kind of conflict. Say to a marriage conflict.
Yes.
I mean, these are conflicts about deep, our deepest beliefs. I mean, this is why we would say that if you're a Christian, you're looking to find a partner, you need to find a Christian partner, because you're, and someone, preferably someone who you can walk with, because actually you being able to walk together spiritually is the most important thing. Because it's true, there are some differences of beliefs that are just not ever going to resolve. So this is different to, a personal, like that kind of personal dynamic of marriage. This is a completely different kind of set of beliefs. And there may be a lot of those beliefs in common, but there's a deep enough difference that will just mean that, you know what, it's actually, you need to get on what you need to do, and you need to get on what you need to do. I think this is actually one of the beauty of there being different denominations. A lot of people are very negative about that, and that might come up with this show. Oh, there's all these different denominations, they're all fighting. No, we're not fighting. We have different denominations so that, we can do the things that we believe, it's like, so we believe that we need to do without there being conflict. So it's actually the diversity of the Christian movement, the Protestant Christian movement, and this is a criticism from the Catholic side, is that, you're all these different churches, you're all divided, and well, no, that we just allow for diversity, because we don't have this centrally controlling body that tells us all what to do and what to believe. We get to read the Bible for ourselves. It's actually diversity. The diversity in the Protestant movement is the consequence of freedom of conscience. And that's what you get when you get, like, either you control it centrally and you tell everyone what to believe and all the churches do things exactly the same, or you give different bodies and different churches the freedom to do things according to their conscience and their reading of the Bible. I'm a Protestant because I believe that we need that kind of freedom, and the cost of that is that kind of diversity. Even to people it means letting people do things that I disagree with, right? Because I can't force people to agree with me, and neither should I try. And I think a lot of the bad kind of quarrels that happen between Christians happen when I try to change you and you try to change me. It's like, do we need to do that? I mean, let's just recognize that there are differences, and yes, and try to connect in areas that we agree on rather than those that we disagree on. I still think it's good to try to connect, but we have to be conscious that there are disagreements and try to connect on the areas that we agree on.
And I think both parties have to go into it saying, we might not come to essential agreement about this particular issue or doctrinal issues, but we both agree that we can disagree while loving one another.
Yeah, that's right.
And loving one another does not mean sanctioning or approving everything that you believe in, but I love you first.
Yeah.
And I think that's the model that Jesus had.
That's right, absolutely.
But it's hard if both parties are not ready to come to that. We're sort of...
I mean, these artificial situations that are set up.
Yeah.
I mean, the media's looking for a fight. I mean, that's how you get ratings.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's an artificial scenario, and I personally doubt that much good is going to come from it.
Well, I'm hoping for the opposite. I hope there's a lot of good discussion comes out of that.
Okay.
All right, that's the end of your little bonus bit here at the end of the podcast. We'll see you next week. Nice one. Do you need to jet? You're getting phone calls like crazy. I'll record the end bits.
They're saying that they've run out of water at home, so I've got to...
See ya.